Welcome, everybody, to today's Council on Foreign Relations CEO luncheon meeting and speaker series with Mike Wirth, who's the chairman and CEO of Chevron. I'm Dan Yergin. I'm going to be chairing this session. I'm vice chairman of S&P Global and a member of the council's board, and I will be presiding, as I say. Let's switch now then to just take a couple of minutes and talk about the oil market. There are two wars going on, a lot of geopolitical tension around the world. And the main question about oil prices right now is how low are they going to go? How do you see the market?
It's been quite an interesting year. Prices started out relatively high, still in response, at least in part, to the risks associated with the war in Russia and Ukraine. And then we have another war in the world. And demand is at record highs. We've never seen oil demand higher than it is this year. And so it's not really a demand story. The Chinese economy has opened back up. And while maybe not as strong as it was a few years ago, is growing. I think what's really been the surprise has been on the supply side. And so you've seen more supply out of a few countries than people might have expected. The U.S. is at the front of that pack, but also Canada, Brazil, and Guyana. And then there was a belief that we would see some supply taken off the market through sanctions. The U.S. and Europe have sanctions in place on Russia, sanctions on Iran, sanctions on Venezuela, all of which have either been maybe more lightly enforced or actually relaxed than I think people might have expected at the beginning of this year. So we've seen more supply in the market, even at record demand, which is why prices have kind of trended the direction that they have over the course of the year.
Chevron's a big player in the Permian, and you sort of talked about supply increasing. A year ago this time, people would have expected the U.S. to grow a little bit, but not a lot. But today, the U.S. is at 13.2 million barrels a day. Mm-hmm. No country has ever produced that much oil, and yet the drilling rigs are going down. How is this happening? What's going on in the Permian?
Well, what you're seeing is the continued growth in productivity. I mean, the early days of shale, if you go back a decade or so ago, it was what I describe as brute force trial and error. And we knew how to drill wells and then turn them and drill them a long way horizontally and then use water and sand to kind of break the rock up. But the spacing, the length of the wells, the amount of water and sand and the pressure, people would try things, and if it worked, you'd do more of that. If it didn't work, you'd do less of that. Since then, we've actually been applying the science and engineering that large companies have to understand why things work and to continue to get better and better and better. And so we're seeing more productivity. Every year we're seeing more efficiency. And you're seeing through a number of acquisitions and consolidations, companies that have the scale to bring these capabilities to bear in a way that just drives further efficiency and industrial kind of progress there.
So would you expect U.S. production to continue to increase?
Yeah, we expect U.S. production to continue to grow again next year. Maybe not quite as much as it's grown this year, but I don't think we're at a point where we should expect to see the Permian plateau.
Right. Now, if we turn to natural gas, Europe was in a gas crisis. It turned out the U.S. became a major supplier of gas to Europe. You, through LNG, again, you're very much in the gas business as well. How do you see this global gas market developing? It's, involves geopolitics and involves markets.
Yeah, so gas demand is growing faster than oil demand for sure. It's displacing coal in power generation in much of the world. And we think it's going to be a part of the lower carbon energy story for decades to come. And so gas demand is strong. European gas supply now no longer comes in on the Nord Stream pipeline from Russia because the pipelines have suffered this explosion that's still not entirely understood. And
somewhat more understood, but not completely.
Not completely understood yet. And Europe has had to, we've seen a reduction in industrial demand, which is probably not a good thing in the long term for their economy. But we've also seen a diversification of sources. They brought in, you can put on a ship the equipment to regasify LNG, and so they brought in what is called floating regasification units. And importing liquefied natural gas now from the U.S., the Middle East, and other places. So they managed to replace some of their supplies. We had a very mild winter last year in the Northern Hemisphere around the world, not just North America and Europe, but also in Asia. And that took some of the pressure off of this market as well. It's a market that needs more investment to create more supply. The U.S. is leading the way in that. The Middle East, Qatar in particular, also some big investments underway. And I think you're going to see gas markets continue to grow, and the world's going to need more liquefied natural gas in the future than it uses today.
The U.S. will continue, of course, to be in a leadership role now.
We have an enormous amount of natural gas in this country, some of it which you can produce just because it's a gas field, a lot of it that comes with oil production. And so as oil production grows, you typically also have natural gas that comes from those wells. And yeah, the U.S. is the largest oil and gas producer now in the world.